I am coming.
Take some really wonderful portraits. This one is great.
Yes.
You've taken photographs, I think very important photographs, but the way they're being taken care of, they won't last.
I have never seen anything like this. Nothing like this. Looking at all these pictures, it's something else. This guy took very, very many pictures. It's just incredible seeing how it has moved the entire community.
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks. This is the YouTube channel / podcast where I, your host, Carolyn Hines, film culture critic and journalist, speak to film creatives around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by my guest, filmmaker, actor, professor, photographer, Ntare Guma Mbaho Mwine. We're going to talk about his documentary, Memories of Love Returned. And this is, I think, an amazing documentary. It's just over an hour long, so it's not like a full feature-length film, but it talks about the life of Ugandan photographer Kibaate Aloysius Ssalongo, who took photographs of the people in his neighborhood in Uganda and its surrounding towns for over 50 years, and he took hundreds of thousands of photographs. And for me, who love photography, not only film but photography, I have a Nikon S90 that I got from my dad years ago, and I haven't taken it up, so I don't even want to open it because it might I don't even want to know what the negatives look like. But watching your film kind of remind me of the love that I had for photography and the pictures I used to take back home in Barbados. So first of all, thank you, Ntare, for joining me to talk about your film. Yay!
Thank you for having me. So wait, I wasn't clear. The camera that you got from your dad had a roll of film in it that he shot?
Film that I shot, because he used to take photographs like years ago, and then he gave me the camera. Yeah. And for about a few years in Barbados, I took a lot of photographs on negatives and stuff. And then I moved to Canada, and I kind of didn't have anywhere to take pictures to get developed because it was very cost prohibitive here. Yeah. And that was right. I moved here in 2009. So that's when everything started to become more digital. And people started to take more pictures on their cameras. So there weren't any places that I could go cheaply to develop a camera roll, right? So I think the camera still has like one roll in it.
And how old is that roll? It's over 10, 15 years now?
Yeah.
This might be my next project.
Might be, because the reason I stopped using the camera is because the button, it needed to get fixed. And the place that I was going to take, the guy was telling me it would be like $800. I'm like, I'm poor. Do not have $800 to send to you to get my camera fixed. So the camera's still there.
That was the dilemma I had with this body of work, because I had thousands of Kibaate's negatives, and the cost of scanning each negative I hadn't anticipated. So I sat on thousands of his negatives for over 10 years because I didn't have the money to digitize them. And it was luckily I got a nice job as an actor starring on this TV show back in 2016, and my first paycheck went towards the cost of digitizing thousands of Kibaate's work. And that's part of what set off this project in motion, to keep this promise to share his work. But it's interesting tie-in with your camera, because it's prohibitive. Sometimes the costs of photography are prohibitive, and there's people who I met when I mounted an exhibit of Kibate's work who could not afford to pay for the photographs that he took of them. And when I did this large scale, first time ever exhibit of his work in his hometown, people who were seeing work that they couldn't afford to have paid for at the time. And fortunately, we gave all that work away at the end of the exhibit. So I think it speaks to a lot of folks in terms of how an image, how much we cling to them for our own sort of sense of identity, and then how you've actually held on to this this role. You could have discarded that, thrown it out, but it's still in the back of your mind that there's something on this role, and maybe one day I'll find out what it is.
One day, because I don't even know. While I was watching the film, I was trained. Because I have the camera in the case in the bag, and I was looking at it because it's in my lane. So I was like, I should get this done, because I was thinking, like growing up in Barbados, what a lot of people don't understand is in the Caribbean, things are very expensive. Technological stuff is very expensive, and I was born in 1983, so like cameras, just the cheap plastic cameras that we would have, like the point and click cameras, were very expensive. Most people were only able to afford them if like someone from overseas in the US or England sent them back. And like my aunt, she worked for the government, so she had like money, so she was the one who took a lot of our pictures when my twin sister and I were young. Like every time we would go out with her, she's the one who would take pictures of us, and like and like for my mom, when my mom got married, and like when we graduated secondary school and primary school, like she has so many pictures of us. My mom has like maybe 4 or 5 photo albums of like family from like before my sister and I were born, and most of them are like Polaroids, like the Polaroids, and you put them in a photo album. Like people don't even have photo albums anymore, and I was thinking of how Kibaate, he didn't have a photo album. He didn't have access to photo album. He kept the negatives in a canvas bag. And some of them that were covered by plastic bowls or stuck in a coat pocket, or in an envelope. And I want to talk about just like what you thought when you found them, because you just happened to meet him, as you said, like it was just a perfectly random occurrence where your car needed repairing, and you were like, okay, let me go and look in this photo studio that's here. And you're like, you see this photography, you're like, oh wait, what about your negatives? And that's where it all began, the negatives, but what was your first thought that you had when you saw how he had the negatives kept in like these canvas bags?
I felt like it was the greatest discovery I could have imagined. It's something I mentioned in the film. When I was born in the States, but both of my parents are from Uganda. And my mom, when we were living in the Berkshires, in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, decided to move back to Uganda, and she put all of our stuff in boxes and shipped it off. And in those boxes were some of my childhood photos, and many of them did not make the journey. They might be in some little trash bin in somewhere in Stockbridge still, who knows. But when I saw Kibate's work, I almost felt like I was discovering my own old lost photos. And the fact that he hadn't exhibited them or, done a sort of public display of his work, I just thought of how many people in those images and those negatives might want to reconnect with those photos, or how family members of those people in those photos might not have seen those images and would like to see them. So when I first discovered his work, it was really like one of the most incredible discoveries for me personally. And then as an actor and photographer, just story-wise, there were so many stories within each negative that I felt I'd landed on a gold mine of possibilities.
And what inspired you to record that meeting? Because as I said, it was just completely, I think, serendipitous. but something in the back of your mind were saying, not only am I going to do this, but I'm going to record it, and even the way you framed in the film, it starts with you looking at the camera and you're talking to, I guess, not only to the audience, but I think to your future self. You say, this is a thing that I'm doing now.
Yeah, I am notoriously documenting everything to my family's chagrin. They'll be like, "Why are you recording this? Why, how can't we just have a moment without recording?" It's my thing. I love to just document things. So it's just by chance that I happened to have. I was touring a play of mine that I wrote and performed. I was touring it throughout Uganda, and I had my cameraman in tow with me, and so we documented those meetings with Kibaate. And I was really fortunate to have him on board because there was times where I tried to do one-man band where I was just on my cell phone or on my own camera trying to record meetings with myself, and it just failed miserably. So I was really fortunate to have someone there to help record at the time. And then little did I know that 22 years later, that footage that I'd shot in Kibaate's studio would be, a key element to this documentary.
Yeah, something that I love about those photographs, I think, are like, as we said, he was taking photographs for 50 years. So, but something I think that is so beautiful about the photographs that he took, and again, it reminded me so much of the pictures that I took as a child, and something that's very, I don't know if it's a thing that we're human beings, like we're still not accustomed even up to now. No, I take that back, because I think now generations that exist now in this millennium, we are more comfortable in front of the camera. Like we're able to like animate and do like cute things and pose and stuff. But before, where the camera was a new thing for us, being recorded and having someone capture images, like the way people stood, like it would seem like they're not posing and that they're not being animated and they look shy and reserved. But I think there's a beauty in the stillness of how people posed in photographs back then, where it's just like they're hesitant about this box, this image capture. But there's something when you look in people's faces and then in the small the gestures that really lets you know they may reserved in front of this thing, but they're perfectly comfortable in their bodies and in their skin. And we need to talk about that aspect of how it comes through in his photography, because he was on train, but I think having that raw talent, that raw eye, and just being able to see people in the moment and take those pictures in the moment where he wasn't concerned about posing them, allow them to be who they were in that moment, whereas like if we are so conscious of every move that we're making, we kind of lose that, not the spontaneity, but the essence of who we are as people existing in a moment. We're too concerned with making sure that we look perfect for the, when we look back on the pictures, and it's just like, I was too concerned about posing instead of just like being relaxed and letting my face just be like still.
Yeah, I think what Kibaate does, which is so stunning for me, is that he captures moments of intimacy that are rarely seen in public, like from like the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and it's, as you said, there's a certain self-awareness, self-consciousness now in front of the camera that you don't see in his work. And if you look at some of his contemporaries like Malik Sidibe and Seydou Keita, and they were shooting people like the upper class, the government officials, the wealthy, who were all also posing and performing and presenting their best selves. And Kibaate was shooting the working man and woman in the rural villages. And there wasn't a sense of pomp and circumstance. It was really almost got to see inside the souls of these people because they weren't putting on airs. And that's part of what I think makes Kibaate's work so special and so timeless. And it's hard to believe that he was able to capture these images because it's almost as if the camera wasn't there in some of these photos. Even though they're looking or they're aware of it, it almost feels like he caught them before he took the picture. Like, I don't know if he tricked them and said, I'm going to shoot it later, and then he took it, but he just captured really beautiful moments of intimacy with people. That was really special.
Yeah, something that occurred to me while I was watching it. There's something that black and white pictures capture that color pictures don't capture. And I think is that color can really show the beauty of the world we live in with all of its colors and the color spectrum and everything. But black and white, I think, strips all of the artifice away, where we have no choice but to look at the subject, but to look at the person or the flower or the animal that's being photographed that can't be noticed in color because there's so many things our eyes are looking at. And it kind of made me think how for what sets his pictures apart from pictures that would have been taken from that era and even earlier, like during the Gilded Age, where photography was becoming more mainstream in a sense, but more for the upper echelons, is I was watching this documentary called The Gilded Age, and it showed how people, like those in upper class, the wealthy, all of their pictures were posed, and all of their, like, if they're in a setting, like, they have the chairs, they got to make sure they wear their best gowns and their best suits. Whereas if a photographer was taking pictures of an industrial worker, it's these people just existing in their space, like their clothes aren't perfectly pressed, they're not clean, they're not like they're not in a palatial home, they're in a shack, but to me, when you look at the lives that are being displayed, the people who the working person looks more lively than the person who's so concerned with making sure that their wealth can be seen, and I think that's what Ntare captures, like these people, like they are who they are in a moment. They're not putting on an artifice, they're not putting on a facade. Whereas, like, it's kind of like I was thinking that it's so much how interesting photography is something that really captures who we are as people and the things that we're so concerned by, and you can see the passage of time. Because there's something that you do in the film that I thought was interesting, where you have like the descendants of the people whose pictures were taken, they're holding up the black and white pictures and they're holding up in front of their clothes, and everyone's clothes are like beautifully colored, because like Africans, like the fabric is stunningly beautiful and very vibrant, but you have the clothing as a backdrop for these black and white pictures, and it creates such an interesting juxtaposition, not only in the photography style that you're using as a filmmaker, but in just what black and white pictures are able to capture. So talk to me about just like your filming style and just the way you edited the film, because I thought it was really interesting, because there's something you do where you're using the voiceover of Kibaate, where he's talking about his health, and he's sick at the moment, but he says, "I'm okay." And you juxtapose that with an image of a young man on a beach who's muscular and healthy and vibrant. And then he asks you, "Oh, what about the book you're going to write?" And then you again juxtapose that with an image of a man with this towering set of books on his head. I thought just the way you've structured the film visually was very interesting. Just talk about that for me for a minute.
Oh, thank you for catching on that. That's I guess the brief moment of magical realism in the film, where I mentioned how I was haunted by Chibaate's voice after he died. Like I felt like he was saying to me, "You must carry on my work." And so in that moment in the film, I just imagine his voice is coming to me, but he's in another world, and he's perfect. He's super fit and very healthy. His spirit as well. And so that's representative of that man who's a Senegalese wrestler, which I shot in Senegal. And then there's a section where we talk about I'm still working on this book that I've promised Kibaate to do, and I shot some footage of a book salesman in Nigeria who was transporting his books for sale, stacked maybe 6 feet high on his head. So I thought that was a great analogy in terms of a visual analogy to the pressure I was feeling to deliver this book.
But it kind of also speaks to like how in our lives there's always one moment that corresponds to another, whether we don't whether we realize or not. Sometimes in hindsight, like there's something that always signals to us a moment that's coming, and we don't pick up on it until it's like like about moment. So like this moment was signaling that, so I kind of saw like just like those two particular vignettes, and even like as I was saying, like the color backing, the color of the clothing kind of like juxtaposing the black and white pictures, because the other thing the black and white pictures is like we don't know the color of the clothing the people wore. So like because of that, we were like, you were kind of like also inserting that what's the word I'm looking for? That loss of color in a
Or
way. So I
providing
thought
a
it was
palette,
interesting.
a reference point. Yeah. Well, we had, I mean, I have so many of Chibate's works, but there's still so many that are yet to be discovered. And so we asked people from the district that he shot in to bring their photos on certain days. And I would take photos of them with their photos just to have documentation of those images. I didn't have a scanner with me, or that was my way of sort of documenting the work that is still out there. And in the process of doing so, it created almost a new frame, as you said, for these images, a contemporary frame for these decades old photos. And you see the hands, like literally the fingertips of the people holding their photos, and just you can see the time passage on their hands. Some of them are holding their kiddie photos, and you see their hands are big now, they're adult hands. So it was really a special thing to see literally hundreds of people come forward. Maybe it might have been 1,000 people come forward with old photos that Chibate had, and how much that meant to them, and how they've clung to those photos for decades. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
he
that's what
took
made the exhibit so special too, for them to see that work in public also. Because this was the first time that there was a public display of this work. And so you can imagine if all those negatives rolls in Barbados that your family took and had a big outdoor exhibit in the town, not in an exclusive studio where people can't get in, but it was outside where people could walk by and see. It really it was like such a celebratory moment for the district and town, for people to rediscover and see long lost photos, long lost relatives. And I'm so grateful we were able to capture it in this film, and now share it with you and the wider audiences.
Yeah, I think we have time for one last question. So I want to actually talk about how the way you set up the exhibition for the pictures, and we talked a bit about the intimacy and the hands and the importance of hands, because another juxtaposition, I don't know if it was intentional for you, but like, because hands are very much a focus in the way you film the documentary itself, but also hands was very in, I think, very important in the photography that Kibaate himself did, because like for like there's images where you're like, is this a same-sex couple, you know? And the way how you could get a hint of that is the way they held hands, or you know, like someone's just lightly resting their hand on someone in a more intimate way than more than a platonic way. And I think the film is very, like, it does talk about the representation of LGBTQ plus people in the Uganda community, and in the photographs that he took, and in how Kibaate gave these people opportunity to be themselves once more again in that moment, but to be themselves as companions and as friends. And it shows like how, again, like even now with all the progressiveness that we have now, people are still, like, you talk about PDA, we talk about PDA, public displays of affection, with a sense of derision. You know, again, growing back up in Barbados, me and my friends would hold hands walking home from school. You know, we hold hands going through Bridgetown, which is the capital of Barbados. And like now, it would be seen more as, like, you know, with a sense of reservation than it was when it was younger. And his film, like, you have people just like lightly brushing their hands, and to me there's something much more intimate about someone just lightly touching someone than just grabbing their hands. You know, it's just like this hint of just like, I'm willing to touch you in this moment. And the way how you display the photographs, I think, does a brilliant job of letting everyone see that, you know, because rather than it just be confined in an indoor space, you're like, it's outside. The photographs are hanging almost like how negatives dry in a dark room, you know, like they're just like, they're flapping in the wind. And then like people can walk up and see, oh, this is a couple, you know, these are friends that are super comfortable with each other. And it's like, you're also letting them be free in a moment like that. So just talk about that for me, because I thought that was really important and a really unique way to just highlight these relationships, and how that complements, or how the way you display the photographs complements that.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I hadn't anticipated when I did the exhibit was that a lot of the people in the photographs had actually passed away. So a lot of these photographs of same-sex friendships or same-sex couples, I don't know the nature of the relationships, what they were, had passed away. So we don't know necessarily what the dynamics of the relationships were, if they were relatives, friends, lovers, what. But what does stand out was the sense of intimacy, as you said. And when framed in sort of a contemporary context within the backdrop of all these strict legislation that has been passed, where same-sex relations are deemed illegal, it framed these photos in a way, in a contemporary way that I hadn't anticipated, because these bills hadn't been passed when I was working with Kibaate. They weren't front and center as they are now. But the exhibit almost became like a memorial and a way to honor those who had passed, celebrate the love that was shared on the camera, that Kibaate captured. And I think that's what people really longed for when they saw that. There was an innocence back then that has been lost in a way. Also, just referring to what you said, there's an innocence in front of the camera that's been lost. That now, since everyone has a phone and camera on their phone, there's been a sort of an innocence that's been lost with the relationship with the camera. So I think that was really what was also something special to see in the film, to see people reconnecting in a way, in a pure way, with photographs, and celebrating them. It was such an incredible celebration of the image and a reflection of oneself, and seeing that celebrated, and now it's going around the world. So I'm so grateful that you in Toronto were able to see it and you're sharing this with your audience. The film will be screening, I'm not sure when this will air, but this will be screening at the AFI Silver Theater on March 23rd. It'll be coming to New York in May, and will be at in Massachusetts in May as well. So it's going out into the world, and I'm grateful for that.
It is. And in thinking about the name of the studio, so the studio was Aqua Tempolo Studio. And like at the beginning of the film, you have a Ugandan proverb, Aquata Empola Atuka Wala, which says, he who moves slowly reaches far. And like it took you decades to get to this point, and it took decades for Kibaate to accumulate like hundreds of thousands of pictures and images and memories and moments, but it's reaching far, the time waits for no man, but like, even though sometimes it's hard for us to admit, like sometimes time moves at the correct pace for the correct moment. So
yeah, it's I'm grateful that it's now finally getting out. But yeah, at times you wish things could go much faster and you want to be at a different pace. And it's unfortunate sometimes when you have to be patient and wait for things to come. But I feel like the stars have been aligning from when we first met by chance. When I first met Kibaate by chance, and that 22 years later, it's now getting out in the world.
And maybe it's happening at the correct time, like a lot of we don't have to get some time to get into it, like things that happened with his family, perhaps like certain moments of familiar resolutions happened at the right time, because they wouldn't have happened while he was still alive. So it happening after he passed was probably the correct time, and give people time to process, and like people who saw their parents and say, my mother went on, but now I still have this picture that came at the correct time, that I can have this memory of her. So yeah, it's like time, like the universe is a strange and wonderful place. And I appreciate you taking the time for talking with me and making this film, because I've got to know about a part of Ugandan history and culture that I didn't know of before. So thank you.
No, thank you. And as they saying goes, time heals all. Is it all wounds or all things?
All wounds, that's what they say. But I'm like, sometimes it just takes too long. But so.
Well, I hope we get to chat again, and I hope the next time we speak, you can tell me what's on that roll of film.
I should make that my goal for this year. Maybe I'll try to get it developed by my birthday. We'll see.
Yeah, well, if you're on Venmo, let me know. We could send a contribution. You can start a GoFundMe to
It would be PayPal. We don't have Venmo in Canada. It's not legalized in Canada. We have PayPal.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye. Have a good day, Ntare.
Thank you, Caroline.